Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Happy Friday to you. I'm just glad it's Friday. It's been a very long week, but we have a very special show for you today. I am joined by Mr. Jeff Bull. Jeff Bull is a husband, he's a father, he's a technology educator. He spends most of his days in a enterprise technology field, just like me. So we have very similar backgrounds from a professional perspective. We'll talk a little bit about that. Outside of those aspects, he's into a lot of good stuff. He's into craft beer. He's into live streaming, which is where we initially met. So we'll talk about tips, tricks, best practices, and some of the aspects that he's learned. We'll talk a little bit about comic books. Maybe he's a comic guy, and like I said, craft beer. I've already got mine. We were a little late because Jeff had to go get his beer, but I was able to stall effectively until he is ready, and I'm still stalling now. He is actually back at his table. Ladies and gentlemen, Jeff Bull, how you doing, brother?
I am fantastic. Happy Friday, man. How are you?
Like you said, I am so glad it's Friday because it's like I told someone during a meeting yesterday, it's like Groundhog's Day, right? And every day just seems to keep going and going. And now that we don't have a commute, Zoom calls just start at 6 a.m. and for some reason don't end, right? Until 8 p.m. So I have logged off, and I there may be some folks at the day job watching because we're streaming on LinkedIn right now. And LinkedIn sends out a notification to everyone that's in your network that you're live now. So shouts out to the folks at the day job.
It's all good. Like more than half the people I work with are either here in the West Coast, on the East Coast, in Amir, wherever. It's fine.
Yeah,
it's 5 o'clock somewhere.
I love it. So Jeff, tell the folks who you are. In our industry, we use the term elevator pitch. Give everyone the Jeff Bull elevator pitch.
That's a great. Okay, so I'll give you the one that I love using on YouTube and other places, which is I love helping people take their passions or figure out what their passions are and bring them to what they do every day. And kind of it sounds kind of existential, but what I mean by that is there are things there's things that you like doing, your hobbies, things that you love doing, whatever those happen to be. But then there's your actual passions, the things that make you get up every morning and go do whatever you're going to do. So what I like to help people figure out is, what are those passions? So here's an example of what it isn't. I had someone ask me this the other day. I'm like, hey, I love playing disc golf, but I'm not going to make a career out of playing disc golf or Frisbee golf every single day. What I am passionate about doing is helping other people figure out like how to use their time throughout the day so they can feel good about what they do. Or I have someone I work with right now who is extremely passionate about teaching other people a particular way of automating processes. He just absolutely loves doing that. Perfect. So how can we help you find a role or some tasks to go do more of that lets you take that passion and do it all the time? And it's something I part of the reason why I do the type of content that I do on YouTube, because it's varied. Look at my channel, and it's all kinds of, it feels like it's all kinds of different stuff. But the idea for me is I'm bringing the passions that I love, that I have, that I finally given myself permission to just go do and bring them. And so subtly what I'm hoping to do is influence people to see that you don't have to be just one thing. You don't have to create either content or what have you that is just the single thing. Like I do my at-home show. We can talk about that at some point if we want. Yeah. I do this at-home show, and I also do a Star Wars live stream that I just kicked off. I do another one that's about studio gear here in my studio, my shed, things like that. They're all different. They're very different. They're all different parts of who I am. But what I'm hoping to subtly influence people to see is that those are just parts of who I am. And the pieces of who you are, you should go do more of that, whether it's manifest in a video on YouTube or something you do at work, whatever. It's far more than an elevator pitch, but I really just kind of wanted to reinforce that. Like, the idea is, if you are passionate about something, try to understand what that is and then find ways to do that or bring that to what you do every day. It's not about make a living out of what you love. I think that's a bad idea. What I think is a great idea is find a role that you can do where you can bring yourself to it, because that's going to make you love how you go about doing that every single day. And that's the best you can hope for, I think.
I agree. And I iterate some of that as well to some of my teams as well. If you don't like what you're doing, if you're not in love with, if you don't have passion about what you do, either on a professional or on a personal basis, you're doing the wrong thing. right?
Totally.
Don't waste your time doing something. Again, if you can't put your all into it, you can't be completely
100%.
satisfied with what you're doing. If you can't be proud of what you're doing, you're doing the wrong thing. Step off
Mhm.
and do something else, because there's just literally no time to be spinning wheels and being unhappy, and especially when you've got a lot of
Mhm.
external forces on you, right? Like right now, right? We're all locked down. We were talking before we went online. We're typically flying all over the country, right, giving speeches or whatever the case may be, and we're used to speaking with
Mhm.
crowds. We don't do that now. Why?
Yeah.
Because we're in a pandemic. We're locked in our own houses, and everyone's mindset has changed. So there's a lot of mental health issues there. But what I really appreciate about what you just said right now is that, yeah, from a 9 to 5 basis, right? You're enterprise IT, enterprise technology, but that doesn't define you,
Mhm.
right?
Exactly.
You've got all these different other aspects you're doing, and you're bringing out your personality. You're utilizing platforms to say, this is who Jeff Bull is. I do home brewing. I talk Star
Mhm.
Wars. I read comic books. I do all of those other things, and this encompasses all of me. So I really love that and appreciate
I,
that.
dude, you bring up something so important, and so at least it's been super important to me, and I'm so glad you mentioned it, which is when I work at Cisco. I've been there for, I don't know, 5.5 years, give or take. And up until October of last year, I've been in sales, various like sales engineering roles. So like, I was the technical counterpart to an account manager being out and selling things. And then I was a manager of other technical counterparts as well. And I moved into this new role in October of last year, where I moved out of sales and into a corporate IT or corporate position, but it's still related to doing the things on a regular basis. And what's interesting is that, to me, when I first did this, I saw it as a big pivot in my career. And I talked to people that I knew that were like, dude, you're still kind of doing the same thing. You're just not selling. I'm like, you're right. I'm not in a sales role. I'm not compensated like I'm
Yeah.
in sales, etc. But that's not why it's such a big deal for me. Is I feel like now in this new role, I can 100% be myself all the time. Tattoos, this stuff, whatever. It may seem superficial to a lot of people, and that's totally fine. Like, there's nothing wrong with feeling that way. But for me, it's the first time in my adult life, in my career, I felt like I can actually allow myself to be viewed as myself
Wow.
literally all the time,
Wow.
and that's okay. And for me, that was a big deal. That was a pivot in my career. We were talking about this before, like you mentioned the suit thing, and I didn't say it at the time, but like, I hate wearing suits. Like, like I have two sport coats, and I would probably have them forever because I just don't wear them very much. But that's okay, because there's right times for that stuff, for me
Yeah.
at least. But it's not who I am. And I'm finally in a role where I don't have to do a thing because that's the thing you're supposed to do. I get to be me, as long as I'm putting out there the stuff that is needed to run what we do.
Yeah.
I can just be me all the time, and that feels really good.
Yeah.
You still, like, you get stuck on certain days, because you always will, but you can feel like, oh man, I'm doing what I love. I'm doing things the way I like doing them. All right, I can own this.
And a lot of organizations, I think, especially in enterprise IT, right? Like you said, you work for Cisco. Mentioned, I work for Dell. I've been there for a while, and I gave, like I said, HP 20 years. That's why I'm all gray right now, because I was at HP for 20 years of my life. But and then the 10 years that I gave Mr. Jobs at Apple, those were very formative years as well. But a lot of industries, especially IT, enterprise technology, they're allowing their employees and their staff to show individualism,
Mhm.
right? So Dell was actually early on in terms of having a work from home type of scenario, or workplace, right? So we were already geared for that. We already had our laptops and our monitors and our remote connectivity, because again, that was just already set up. So falling into 2020 because of the lockdown was less of a challenge for a lot of folks. Again, my organization, and I think maybe even at Cisco, or maybe even at something
Mhm.
like Microsoft, or some other organizations. But I do like the fact that, again, today we can actually be ourselves. I can be on a Zoom call with a hat on, with a hoodie on, and be myself. Do the jazz hands like I tell my kids that I do all day, but have the content come out and have the message come out and still be seen as a subject matter expert,
Yeah.
as an evangelist for whatever I'm
Mhm.
talking about. So I hope that translates to a lot of other companies, a lot of other organizations, because, and I hate saying the term new normal, but I think as we continue to progress, that's just going to be how it needs to be. Folks,
Yeah.
being remote, showing their own personality, being comfortable in whatever their message is, and you can still again have that authority. But
Oh yeah.
that's just who we are now and what we do. So
It's an interesting topic that you bring up. I thought about this a lot, and I 100% agree with you. The fact that more and more companies have adopted this idea that, be at home, like you said, hoodie on, hat on,
yeah,
t-shirt on, whatever it is, and you are still you, and you are still putting out the same content or message, or whatever you need to for the person on the other side of that Zoom call, the WebEx, or whatever you're on. And what's kind of an interesting thing to think about is when we do go back to some kind of hybrid work environment where we're in offices periodically or what have you, whatever that looks like. My hope is that the idea of like, we don't just have the kind of stereotypical startup culture and then corporate where like they're flexible and nimble and dynamic and everyone's unique and special and lunches are brought in and then here's your cubicle farm and there's nothing in between.
yeah,
I hope, and what I'm seeing a lot of is the individualism that this is bringing out in so many more people, because many companies are willing to embrace that.
mm-hmm.
My hope is that it translates organically back into some sort of setting in the office so that more people just like, no, I'm just going to be myself when I show up, and I'm going to make my career decisions based on whether I feel like I can be myself when I show up, because it's so important that it's not just that you're yourself, but you can feel comfortable in who you are, because that's a very early step in getting people to work through more like diversity type challenges and things
Mm-hmm.
like that, because the more that we can see each other as who we actually are, the more we can start to have empathy and open communication and all that type of stuff, which doesn't just help people, but helps the businesses too. It's a baby step because there's a lot more that has to be tackled for that.
Correct,
but
correct.
it's an early step. And I'm really hopeful that this is the beginning of that sort of change, because I think that's really needed.
I tell folks, there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and it's not necessarily a train coming barreling down on us. So,
So true, man.
so,
So
so,
true.
so yeah, so we'll see. Um, let's pivot just a little bit. Let's talk. So we talked a little bit of enterprise IT, and you know what? I may invite you on another show that I have called the Technologist Forum, because we can definitely get into the weeds
Oh,
and
dude,
start
totally.
talking about. Well, you got your see. I mentioned WebEx, and I apologize. And then
Oh,
you corrected me.
no, it's
No,
cool,
I
dude.
no,
Don't
I
worry.
no, I mentioned Zoom, and then you corrected me and said WebEx. I said, "Oh yeah, Cisco
Oh, dude, no.
owns on WebEx," and I thought about that. I apologize on that. Oh my god, faux pas, faux pas.
It's all good, man.
Um,
It's all good.
but I'm not sure if they're watching, and kind of we talked about this again before we went online. But
I'm
your
gonna start getting
shirt,
messages in my chat over here. Jeff,
I've
what are
got.
you doing? What are you doing?
No, we talked about your shirt, and your shirt means a lot to me just for those
Mhm.
initials. And again, I may get some messages from folks watching, wanting to understand that. It doesn't mean what I thought it means, but tell the folks what your shirt means, and then
Totally.
I'll explain it.
So if you're whether or not you're in the realm of computer networking or just network technology, so BGP is a routing protocol that stands for Border Gateway Protocol. So once you know that, the command to actually turn on or to enter a route into a router is route BGP, or it's part of the command line that you use. So the route BGP, route 66, it kind of makes sense. It's from a company called Thousand Eyes that Cisco acquired a year or so ago, but they've been around for a while now, and they just make really legit t-shirts. And I love collecting fun t-shirts like this because it makes people ask you a question, and it's kind of a good conversation starter, which is fun for video. So I was trying to pick what shirt to wear for this, and like, no, I'm just gonna wear what I've been wearing all day. And they're like, oh, I'm like, when I knew your background and what you did professionally, and I'm like, oh, well, then you'll get this, and
Yes,
this will be
I,
perfect.
I did. But see, of course, as soon as you came on camera, I deviated and had a flashback, because my family and friends that are watching know I used to work for a company called BGP, Bill Graham
That's right.
Presents, which was acquired by Clear Channel Entertainment. So did live event promotions and security. So I did that for a number of years as well. And I immediately thought, oh my God, have I seen this guy at a concert? And then did I have him arrested and thrown out for trying to jump on stage or something? That would just be
I
very
mean,
awkward if
I'm not gonna say it didn't happen, but
if you were at the Metallica show in Berkeley and you tried to jump on stage, if you were the guy that we had arrested, I would really feel awkward right now.
I can neither confirm nor deny this event occurred.
It's all good. It's all good. How is 2020, the new start of 21, affecting your family? Your dad. You got a young one at the house. How is that transition or difference? How's that affecting the family life right now? I'm always interested to hear about
Yeah,
folks with kids and how they're
it's a really
coping and dealing.
oh totally, man. It's really interesting that not just that you asked, but it's kind of an interesting year, and everyone's got their own interesting story for sure. Our 2020 was weird, but not for the reasons that I think affected a lot of people. I mean, as you know, like even in whatever role in sales you're in, at the end of the day, you still work remote a lot
Yeah.
because of the nature of what you do. You're not always just driving to customer sites and talking to customers, or in your case, partners, your customer. Like you're not always doing that. There are times where you're at home doing things or in a coffee shop or what have you. So being remote, and at the time, I live in the Bay Area, generally around where you live, or kind of relatively in
Hmm.
the same vicinity.
Hmm.
I used to live in the North Bay, kind of in wine country. So I would have to commute down into the Bay Area all the time anyway. And so when we moved to the East Bay, I was working remote a lot. Like we have an office in the East Bay, and I'd go there a few days a week, but I would work from home just as often because it didn't really matter a lot. So when this first happened and the stay-at-home order came in for California, it wasn't too foreign for me. I'm like, oh, I'm kind of already home. I had just built this shed to have like a cool studio that I was doing at home anyway. I'm like, okay, well, I got my own space to work. I'm lucky. This isn't a huge deal for me. My wife runs her own business, so she's in the office in the house. The hard part was though, yeah, as a dad, my son was home because school's closed down for a couple months.
Yeah.
Even though he's 5, so he's in sort of like a preschool, which is considered daycare. They didn't open back up to non-essential workers' kids for a while, which totally makes sense.
Hmm.
So we were trying to navigate that a bit. And it was hard because she's like, look, I'm trying to work and I'm being like default parent.
Yeah.
You're out there in meetings all day. So I had to it was the first iteration that happened for us is I had to sit back and for myself, I had to say, I need to realize that my day is not more important than her day. And I had to tell myself and remind myself that. It was a humbling experience for me because I had to really empathize with the position she was in. So that was like the first major hurdle we had to deal with. Major is probably an overstatement, but we dealt with it and we got through it. We figured out, no, these are the hours I have. I blocked off 2 chunks every day on my calendar. No one could book anything on them. And those are the times I'm in the house with him. We do whatever we're going to do so she can get her job done.
Yeah.
And so then he went back to school shortly after, and some sense of normalcy came back because we're at least working and he's in his school and no big deal. But what really tripped us up later in the year is, and you probably didn't know this, and it's just a thing. I don't talk about it a ton. My wife was diagnosed with cancer mid last year.
Okay.
And so she went through cancer treatment. So for a while there, for about 6 weeks, she was in treatment. And so she couldn't do anything. She couldn't move, get out of bed. She was sleeping all the time. So while he was in school, it was fine. But on the weekends, it was just me.
Right. Okay.
That made it really tough. Not because I couldn't be around a 5-year-old, on a weekends. It's fine. I could deal with it. I love being around him and spending time with us. I say deal with it, not like it was hard to be a dad, but anybody who's a parent knows, like a 5-year-old by yourself. It's not an easy thing to do.
Keep you active for sure. Yeah. Very
Oh
active.
yeah. So I think that was the hardest part, but what helped is when she finally started getting better to the point that she felt more like herself again after the treatments ended.
Mm-hmm.
The two of us finally sat down and we were out in the front yard. My son's just playing playing around in the front yard. And she and I got talking. We both just started having a conversation about what sucked last year. But then what we led to was like, but what good stuff actually came out of it? And we realized that as bad as the bad things were last year, the good things actually were pretty cool. Like I started live streaming a ton. She revamped her entire business and she's feeling completely motivated now at this point she's got this whole business thing going on.
Awesome.
I got a new job that I feel amazing at. I feel just so much more like myself all the time. So yeah, the bad was pretty bad.
Yeah.
But the good actually was pretty damn good. You couldn't have looked at that in May or June last year.
Exactly.
But in October, November, it's a different thing. And it was nice. It felt good. So I don't want to say that 2020 was a good year because I can't say that. But I can say that we walked out of it, both of us feeling like, you know what? This was not as bad as we thought it was. And a lot of the bad stuff we can put behind us because the good, you said earlier, that light at the end of the tunnel. Yeah, I can see that there's all the kind of the crappy things around it, but I can still see that light and it's there and it's getting brighter all the time. You know what? And it's a lot easier today to focus on that than it was 6 months ago, which
I love that, man.
I'm going to take that. That's what I got to stick to.
Take that to the bank all day. And, I appreciate you telling that story. And I really wanted to hear that from someone who's a father of the younger kids, right? So my kids are how old is Isaiah? Isaiah is so
How old are your
16 and 19. I've got
What are
two.
your
They're a little bit older, right? But I really wanted to hear the perspective of someone going through it with someone who is asking the question, well, why can't I go to school? Well, why do I have to stay home? Why can't I go play with my friends? Why do I,
Mhm.
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
When you have to have that type of a conversation
yep,
with someone,
absolutely.
they see everything and they absorb and soak it in, as you know. But again, you have to answer a different level of question
Mhm.
from the young adult. But more importantly, I want to say, uh, I'm glad your wife's feeling better.
Thank you. Yeah,
So
she
that
is doing much, much better these days. She
that
still has to wait until I think June to find out for sure if it's how much they got because she's in a trial for it. But she can't feel the tumor anymore. She's feeling much
beautiful.
more like herself on every single day. So
Beautiful.
no
I, s-
complaint.
I say we segue and have a drink to that, and then
Dude,
we
I
and
will.
we talk about your home brew and crafting
Oh man.
aspects.
Well, cheers.
Oh my gosh, I don't know what so I'm drinking. This
What
is
do you?
brand new.
What is it?
I opened it up specifically for you because you are a
Oh, aw.
home brew guy. It is a Sierra Nevada coffee stout.
Ooh, nice.
I've never had this. My wife bought it. She bought some fancy beers at one time, and I what is how potent is this? 6.2.
Yeah,
Eh,
that's about right.
it's close to 5.
Yeah,
Again, if
it's
my
close
if
to
my
5.
director's watching,
I feel like this is a
it's
hard the
okay.
moment. Like 13 parsecs. No, not if you don't run down. Just got to round down. I'm down. It's fine. It's closer to 5 than 10. So
Somewhere, right? We follow the sun, right? We use that
exactly,
term in our industry, follow the sun.
exactly.
So what are you drinking over there?
I
And
have
and talk a little bit about your craft brewing
yeah,
aspects.
dude, you got it. So brewery is Tilted Mash Brewing. I've started picking up. There's a place here in Concord called the Concord. What are they called? Oh, craft beer, Concord Craft Beer. It's a new store. They took over an old like liquor store, and it's like they've revamped it to like all kinds of craft beers. And so I stop by there periodically, social distance and all that, to pick up some new stuff. And I always pick up some. They only do tall boys, and they all do. It's always weird, unique stuff. So this is called Yamba Juice, or sorry, Yamba Use. It's an orange creamsicle. They say,
Ooh.
what does it say? It's an imperial sour, 8.5%. I forget what's actually in it, but seriously, it tastes like one of those pops you got off of the ice cream truck when you were kids. There was the
Yeah.
orange creamsicle. This literally tastes like that. It doesn't taste sour. It tastes like ice cream. It's wild.
Well, 8.5%. You're going to be sleeping about 45
Oh, I'm gonna
minutes.
feel
So
amazing. I really hope my wife can take care of my son tonight because I don't know how productive I'm going to be at this point.
yeah, by 6:30, you are going to be snoring in the backyard.
I
So
will be sitting on the couch with my Legend of Zelda and the Nintendo Switch, and I'm like, "Honey, are you feeding the kid? Okay, cool. I'm just gonna play my game. That's all I'm gonna do." No, that will not happen. But it feels good to say that.
which hold on, because you just piqued something else there. Now we'll get back to your home brewing. Which switch do you have? Do you have the light or do you have the big one?
I think I have the big one. I
Dude,
didn't know there was a light.
all right. I need to get one of those. My daughter's not watching right now because she's at work and been trying to find one of those since last November.
Oh, really?
So if you know somebody at Nintendo, hook your boy up, right?
Okay.
Look, I'll pay top dollar, whatever the case may be. Money's no object. I'm trying to
I
get a
got
couple
you.
extra cool
All right,
days.
I'll make some. I know a guy. I'll make some phone calls.
That's all I need, brother. Just take care of me. Okay.
You got it. Dude. You got it. I'm all over it.
Now, are you still brewing at home?
So I'm not. I brewed. It's actually a really cool story. So it's funny and cool. When my son was born, I actually tried to have a brew day like a month after my son was born, and my wife's like, "So wait, you're going to be in the garage for 6 hours while I'm in the house with a newborn?" And I'm like, "No, I'm going to be in the house helping you, babe. I promise. That's what it's going to be."
That didn't go over well.
I stopped. I brewed a couple of times after he was born, but I realized pretty quickly that I had been, I don't want to say in the beer industry, but I had been around like beer adjacent for a long time. I'd been a beer blogger for a while. It's how I actually got to know like all the breweries in Santa Rosa, like Russian River and all the ones out there. So I have a lot of good friends who work at those breweries or own them, what have you. Okay. And what I found is I started realizing that my preference was not really for the brewing. It was for drinking, but I don't just mean drinking, but like going to events and participating in those events and like the social relationship aspect of it. So I went out and got my Cicerone. So I have the level 1 Cicerone. And so I started doing homebrew events. Because I knew people and folks knew that I did that, I started periodically getting invited to like either homebrewing events to be a judge or to a local beer event like the Battle of the Brews and a few others in Santa Rosa. And so I started doing that. And to be honest, I ended up having a lot more fun. I have a ton of friends who are still homebrewers. I'm like, great. I sold my 10-gallon system and my keg system and all that to a few friends. They got to go use that forever they wanted. And then I just got to go to events and be like a judge or what have you. And it worked out. It was one of those things like my passion it was for creating, but not for creating that. I realized it took me 8 years to realize that, but whatever, you know what?
Yeah.
No big deal. Figured it out. And I started doing the thing I actually really enjoyed. My wife would come with me. We'd go to events all the time. It was a lot of fun, but that whole love is what actually led me to get this particular tattoo sleeve.
You've got hops and barley permanently tattooed.
So this sleeve is dedicated to brewing. So there's barley and hops. There's a monk inside, Belgian monk inside brewing. There's a mash tun. There's a kettle, fermenter on there. Everything. It's part of you. It is part of me, man.
I love that.
The beer industry will always be a part of me, no matter how distant for times I get from it. It will always be a huge part of me because it just is. I mean, I think the friend base that I built when I first moved from Reno, which I'd been in for like 11 years, when I moved there when I was like 22 years old. So I moved back to California after that. And I became friends with people because I would go to the Whole Foods tap room in Santa Rosa, which was the first Whole Foods ever that put a tap room in the Whole Foods.
Okay.
I would go there. It was literally 2 blocks away from my apartment. It was like 2 blocks from my apartment and 2 blocks from my work. So it was like, go to work, go to Whole Foods, come home. And I would sit there and all of the local brewers, like from Russian River and other places, that's like where they went after work to have beers and just hang out for a little bit and like decompress after a day of work. And the guy who worked at the tap room was a really well-known home brewer that I got to know who opened his own brewery. And so like just being there by proximity, I got to know everybody. Worked out great. It was super cool.
Let me ask you something. So, because you say something that kind of piqued some interest there, and I wonder if you were in a different environment, would you be as passionate about it? You said that it wasn't necessarily you were drawn to the social aspects of it, right?
Yes.
Brewing and meeting folks and having conversations. I'm gonna summarize and say learning the process.
Yeah, absolutely.
If it was you were closer to Napa, if you were closer to the wine country, would you have gravitated as much towards something like that, or is there just something about just
That's a good question.
Community of folks in the beer industry?
I hadn't thought about it like that. So I started homebrewing when I lived in Reno. You know what? That's a really good point because the reason I started homebrewing was I got to meet somebody and become friends with him, and then the group of people he introduced me to were all homebrewers. And I'm like, oh, I never considered doing this. And so I would go to their house and hang out with them when they brewed. And that's where I started like, oh, maybe I could do this too. I can brew beer. And that's what led to it. So by the time I came out to Santa Rosa and that part of wine country, I was already into beer. Like we would go, my wife was huge in the wine industry as a marketer. So we would go to wine events all the time. Right. And it was fun. I enjoyed the relationships and the social aspect of it. I've never had an interest in making wine, but I do love talking about the science. But I think you bring up a good point. If I hadn't developed that interest through home brewing at the time, I don't think going to those events would have meant the same thing. I would have gone to them with her and be like, oh, okay, we're here. And this is cool. But
another thing.
knowing this, but kind of like knowing the science, it's actually why I ended up moving more into baking. Like I still am huge into beer and I go to beer events whenever I used to when I could. Yeah. But that's what got me into baking is I'm like, well, if I'm not going to brew, I still need to do something. And baking, the science is still yeasties and things like that that you make yourself. I'm like, so I make tons of bread and pastries and things all of the time. That's like my new thing because it reminds me a lot of beer.
You know how to make a cheesecake?
I have never made a cheesecake. But I
got a guy. My son. Let me tell you something. I'm going to give a shout out to my 16-year-old son. A good friend of mine showed him how. I don't even know the recipe. It's so secretive. Like it's kind of like a fraternity handshake, right? That they've shared amongst themselves. I don't even know what it is, but my son can make an amazing cheesecake. And when the world opens back up, I'm driving down the road and dropping you off a Oreo cheesecake.
Don't you play with my emotions?
I love it. So let me ask you this too, because I'm not even looking at the questions that I was going to originally ask you because you're piquing some interest on a whole lot of different things. And you say down there by Russian River, so you got the Pliny's down there,
Mhm.
and you got all that wonderful stuff. Understanding and enjoying the process again of making beer,
Mhm.
talking to folks about it, spreading the knowledge, things like that. It seems to be that was some of the foundation for you moving into live streaming, into telling stories online and sharing your knowledge with folks. That it seems that it was almost kind of a cause and effect thing, right? The
Mhm.
fact that you had a new passion, you were meeting folks, you were learning things, and you wanted to talk about it. Is that kind of where you started? Because you've got a couple of really good show topics and series going on your channel, which we'll talk about here now. But it was that kind of some of the things that pushed you into
Absolutely.
turning the
Yeah,
lights on, firing up a camera, and that kind of thing.
definitely. Yeah, it started, fun fact is I actually did have a podcast for a hot minute, back in
Okay.
the day when I lived in Reno. This is probably I've been here for what, 8 years? So probably about 14 years ago, give or take. I
Okay.
had a beer podcast with a couple friends, where we would just talk about and have shenanigans over drinking beer for a couple hours. It was fun. We had a really good time with it. It didn't go very far because getting people together at the time, like doing over Skype, just really didn't work super well unless you had a lot of equipment. So they'd have to come to my house, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But we did it. And we did it for a good couple of months, and it was a lot of fun. And that's where I originally got the bug that, like, ooh, maybe I could do that. But I never really had the inkling to sit down and really try to figure out. And at the time, you needed equipment to do it. Like, there wasn't good software,
Yeah.
affordable software to do it
Yeah.
just on your Mac. So it just really didn't work out super well for me. But the bug was like always there. And I think now that you mention that, like, I think maybe subconsciously I was always trying to find a way to do that in some form, or take that energy and go do it in other places.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, when Lita, the live streaming thing that we both been a part of at some point, happened for me last April, when I saw that come up from Live Streaming Pros, I was like, what the heck is Lita? And I looked into it. I'm like, oh, well, you know what? I need something. I need a thing to go do right now. And at first I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, I don't want to do live streaming. Like, I just maybe want to make some videos and get better at that. Okay. But as I started doing that, and then, yeah, all these things started pouring back to me, like, well, I could do this topic, and I could do that topic, and I could try this thing, and I could do that other thing. And it just, the motivational energy just kind of picked back up again. And yeah, it had been spurred on by the fact that I had a passion in the craft beer industry, and I knew how to talk about it, and I knew how to be around it, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I don't do any shows right now based off of beer, which is totally fine. But yes, it was a catalyst for giving me I think the energy to feel like, or the permission to feel like I could go do whatever it is I want to go do. And right now those passions happen to be in other places, but
Yeah.
whatever, like, that doesn't matter.
Perfect segue. Let's talk about at home. What do you got going on?
I like that.
It was almost like that was planned, but
Like,
it
it's like
kind
we
of.
thought about this ahead of time.
I'll drink to
Wild.
that. I'll drink to
Um,
that.
So yeah, At Home is a show that I started right at the beginning of the pandemic. I was right when they put the stay-at-home orders in California. I was talking to my boss at Cisco at the time, and I kept saying, I feel like other people are. I was a manager, and I was telling her that I felt like the individual contributors who work for us are really struggling. Some of those I had talked to, like, I'm just not used to being physically in my house all of the time. I used to be on the road and visiting people, and they were struggling with it. And so I came up with the idea of, like, what if I could just interview a few folks and put it on YouTube about, like, how they're dealing with this, and start off with some leaders at Cisco, leaders in the Bay Area that people knew who they were, to hear from them, like, hey, they're dealing with the same kind of problems you're dealing with. And again, try to make those problems just a little bit smaller, or feel a little bit smaller than they were. Because the pandemic is huge. Like, we can't solve that ourselves, but if we can make it feel just a touch more real for us, or more close together for us, maybe it can make you feel like it's not so hard to get up in the morning. And so that's where it started. And after the first few episodes of doing it, it just kind of became its own thing. I started interviewing other people. I did take a break for a bit when my wife was doing her cancer treatments, because it was just too hard to keep the mental energy going to focus on her and help her and do this. But I picked it back up again back in November, December timeframe, because I was feeling like, she's better, or not better, but she's feeling more like herself. She's engaging. I need something for me. I gotta start doing something for myself again. So I started doing the interviews, and it feels really good, because you brought this up already. It's so amazing, especially being at home all the time. when you now we like almost yearn more for these human interactions that we have over Zoom, over WebEx, over StreamYard, like whatever it happens to be.
Yeah.
Connecting even for just a couple of minutes, half an hour, makes such a difference, much more so than it ever did before. Because before, like, okay, go get together with my friends and have a couple of drinks. We can do that whenever. There's a lot more intention that has to be behind it for this to happen and to really make it effective. And that's, I think, what has been spurring me on to do more of the at-home shows. Is I want to just bring more real people and put them in front of other real people to say, look, you're not so alone out there. Like, yes, your problems may be different than their problems, maybe a lot worse than their problems, or less, easier than their problems. But we're all having challenges right now. If I can help everyone just see these things as just a little bit smaller, it's sort of the same thing that a lot of people out there say about politics, where all politics are local politics. When you hear that and you kind of think about what that really means, the show, I'm not trying to be political, but the show that I do is intended to sort of be that. Like, let's make these things as local as we can. And even if local means just you and a friend or you and a colleague over video, then let's do that, because it really does help. I believe it really does help.
No, I agree. And one aspect about doing these shows and doing these engagements is you can't fake it. Right. I'm looking right at you. Right. I mean, you may have a great poker face and I don't, but you may have you can't fake it when you turn again, the lights on and the camera starts recording and a question gets asked. The first thing that comes out from your mind really comes out in terms of the conversation. So you have to be genuine if you're going to do something like this. If you're going to be a content creator, if you're going to be someone who influences community, they're going to read between and see any falseness, any fakeness. If you don't have that passion, and it's very evident in the shows that you do. I could tell you've got the passion for, again, having that message delivered, having folks tell their story about helping them get through whatever trying times or even good times. I've definitely seen that in the shows, and I've seen the progression as well. So this is funny. I've seen the progression of your production. Your studio is just amazing now. That's why I'm glad I've got the widescreen right now, because let's get focused for a minute. Let's talk about where you are and this whole studio lineup that you have, because you've got the good bokeh in the background, and you got the lighting action. Talk to us a little bit about what you got.
Oh man. Okay. So for this, but for anybody watching the show, I'm actually in a shed in my backyard. So this is an 8x10 shed that I built. I actually physically constructed myself. I did not design it, and I didn't like hand cut all the materials. I didn't go that far, but I bought the kit from like Costco. It was delivered, and I assembled this myself. There's a longer story behind that, but the shorter version of it is 3-bedroom house. My wife needed an office. We were working together, and it just wasn't working.
You got kicked out
all day.
You got kicked out. Yeah.
And I really did. She was like, you don't go away mad, just go away.
She threatened to change the locks on the front door, and you came up with an alternative.
Yeah, there's a big stop sign on the door. Nothing too blatant, but enough to know that you're just not supposed to be here anymore.
Been there.
So we were having our backyard landscaped right after we moved into the house, which was before the pandemic. And as we were doing that, I'm like, it's a small space in the yard, but I'm like, hey, maybe I've got some room to do something. I asked her if she would mind, and it actually worked out great. So I had the shed. I had a pad poured, and I built the shed physically over 3 or 4 months or something. But it's been really cool because it's like a culmination of a few things. It's allowed me to have my own space. I can come out here and get work done, whatever else. But it's also let me pour my excitement for doing live video or edited video, whatever, into the space I'm in. And again, going back to that sort of career pivot too, it's let me also manifest who I really am into the space that I am. So I can feel more comfortable about what's behind me. I used to be at an angle this way, and I had certain things behind me, so it looked a particular way on customer meetings, etc. But all of that has sort of changed to feel what you're seeing here is really just like if I took word vomit out of my head and put it into the walls, that's what this is. And I say that in a silly way, but I think really it helps me remember that this is who I am. Just be yourself. Yeah. It's all symbolism. This is just helping me be myself. And I happen to love Star Wars, so there's just Star Wars here and here and here and
everywhere, which is good. Hold on. Let's zoom in a little bit. Let's go ahead and zoom in on. Well, we don't need me in the screen here, but let's get you.
Oh yeah, there's everything, man. So I've got for anybody out there who's into Star Wars, so right here, there's some Jedi and Sith holocrons. There's bobbleheads from the Star Wars Rebels TV show. There's some Legos right here. On this side, you can see there are more Legos because I love Legos. Some of my favorite characters are up here. These are some prints from the latest Star Wars High Republic series that they just came out with. It's just begun recently. So yeah, a little bit of everything. Well, more than a little bit of everything.
I love that.
I do like Star Wars a lot. Yeah. I do have one Star Wars tattoo, just one. Maybe it'll be more later.
I'm sure there'll be more.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, okay.
If you've got a full sleeve of beer,
there will clearly be more Star Wars tattoos later.
Yeah, you have a full sleeve of beer, barley and hops. You've got to at least put some more attention into your fandomness for Star Wars.
Yes, that's going to be a thing.
You got to do that.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we talked about the shed. We talked about. I want to dive a little bit more into what you're doing in the shed again. So we talked about obviously the at-home video series, which is phenomenal, and you just kicked off a Star Wars focus show as well. So
the Kessel Chat.
So have you actually filmed an episode? I know you were hinting at it.
Yep, I have done 2 live streams last Thursday and yesterday morning. So yesterday morning was episode number 2. I go live on Thursday mornings at 10:30 a.m. on YouTube. On the channel. I do it live specifically because it's a challenge for me. I wanted to make sure that I've got some new, I got the studio set up now. I've got this little stream deck sitting in front of me so I can kind of control my show flow. I'm going to do this. I'm going to put myself out there. I'm going to be live. I'm not going to try to make it forced. And you said it too. There's something, at least for me, there's something about live video that you're like, oh, there's no script. I'm just talking and we'll see how this comes out. And if I flub, it's actually kind of cool when you make mistakes, because I feel like when you're watching someone else and they make a mistake and then they just kind of keep going, you're like, oh, okay, this person's just a person like me. All right, cool. I can keep watching this. You don't feel like it's really that forced, which is, to me, at least it makes it more fun. I want to make it a more human, connectable thing. I love doing it because I clearly love Star Wars. It's a big deal for me, but it's a big deal not because I'm just a geek for the thing. I am. I'm also a huge, huge fan of storytelling, using stories to convey complex messages to people who don't understand them, whatever that happens to be. It's a big, big deal for me. And I've studied
that's what we do see, that's why we align so much, because that's literally the definition of what we do on a day-to-day basis from a professional perspective.
Yep.
That's it right
It's
there.
awesome, dude.
Keep talking. This is a short URL to your YouTube channel because I didn't want to put the long. So I created.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I love it because there's the space opera thing and there's the hero's journey and all those kind of concepts in the fiction that is. And I love, for me personally, I love fiction much more so than nonfiction these days, because I don't need to be buried more in real world drama so much anymore, especially with 2020. If I'm going to read a book or watch a series, I want to lose myself for a little bit in something that doesn't mean anything, that's just enjoyable, and then I can come back to the real world. So I've gravitated a lot more to fiction stuff because I'm like, I just need to disconnect from it. I don't need serious crap for a while. But the Star Wars show has been really fun because I'm getting a chance to sort of wax poetic about storytelling and break down, if I'm reading a book or a comic book or whatever new series they put out, I like to break down story components. What's awesome about one of the books they put out, Claudia Gray is the author. She's put out a number of Star Wars books. She's an amazing author, but her book is called Into the Dark. And there's kind of, I don't want to say 4 main characters, but there's one main and then 3 kind of main adjacent characters. And what's fun about them is when you start off, the main character, he's a Jedi Padawan. So he's basically like an apprentice for anyone who's not into Star Wars. His character's an apprentice essentially. And you kind of start from his perspective. He's a little self-conscious. He has to work harder at things than other people do, et cetera. And so a lot of us can connect with those ideas because you're like, things don't come as easy to me. I have to work harder at them. Yeah. And then he sees the other 3 that show up, and you hear him view those characters and this person's really good at this, and this person's great, and kind of sees them as on high. And then it switches perspectives to them, and you hear their view of the same situation, and you realize they're no different than him. They have their own insecurities, even though they're far more experienced than he is. And I love that idea because what it's conveying is that all of us have our own insecurities and we're all dealing with our own things. Someone else sees you a particular way. Just because you don't see that doesn't mean they don't view you a certain way. And it's helpful because it helps to know that people do kind of look up to you for some reasons. It also helps you in realizing that the things you may be self-conscious about, many people or most people probably don't ever see that. And I like that because it's a hard thing to discuss with people without getting too much into like things that people get defensive about. But
Yeah.
you read a book like that and you start to see it manifest in a story, and you're like, oh, I'm not sure why I connect with this, but I really relate to this.
So let me ask. So are you consciously, because you're doing something, and I don't know if if you know that you're doing it. Are you consciously looking to provide, I'm gonna say, a counseling session? Because really you're telling folks that you're telling the story, and it's coming from a fictional base, or whatever the case may be, but really can apply that to real world everyday situations. And
Yeah.
I can almost guarantee you the folks that are listening to your show and hearing you go back and forth between just the comic book, the manuscript, whatever you're reading,
Mhm.
and they can relate that to literally trials, tribulations, joy, successes, failures, whatever in their real world. You could be those
It's
Thursday 8:30 a.m. sessions could really be couch
Yeah,
sessions with
it is
folks.
very intentional. I did that
Okay.
very intentionally because I do some campy stuff because it's fun, and I'm
Hmm.
like, why would you be here on Thursday? What's better than joining on another Thursday morning to talk about Star Wars? More Star Wars. I mean, so of course I'm going to be campy about it because it's silly and funny, and why not? But I also like to I do like to pick up those more nuanced topics because that to me is it's what makes a like people who are into the Marvel Cinematic Universe or
Hmm.
Star Trek or there's a million other fiction, Game of Thrones, or I don't know, you pick any fictional type series that's been around for generations, decades. People don't connect to them just because these are good stories. And I like reading about dragons or space operas. Cool. I mean, maybe you do, but that's not the reason you keep rereading a book. It's not the reason you keep watching TV shows. It's not purely because they are just entertaining. There's always something more to it that is keeping you coming back to
Yeah,
that.
I like that.
And for me personally, I like to really analyze that and understand that because I like to know what is it about the thing that you're consuming, video, text, whatever, that makes you want to come back and think about that. Because if you can think about that and you can be self-aware of it, you can do something with that information. You can actively then go intentionally do something with what you just learned or what you just recognized about yourself. And so, yeah, in part, I want to intentionally bring some of that to light from these books because I think it can actually help people at least be a little bit more self-aware for themselves. So you're not just getting lost in a story, you're getting lost and you're recognizing that it makes you feel a certain way and you can identify that because then you can recreate that more often. It's not just I stumbled into a book and wow, I felt good. I don't know why that happened. And then you move on. Like, oh, that's how it helped me. I'm going to try to keep doing that more intentionally.
Folks, I hope you guys realize Jeff's dropping some gems here on you. So
Where's my
this
microphone?
is some good stuff right
Should I
here.
really take the microphone off to drop
Bro,
it? It's be awkward.
if I was logged in the eCam, I could do my sound effects, but I haven't fully turned that in
I
yet
do
for
have
this show.
I'll send it to you. I do have a box in the garage I bought for people, but I forgot to give away to of microphones about this big, but they're stress dolls, so that you can specifically have a little squishy stress doll microphone that you can just drop it.
Do they have Cisco written on them?
They do not. They do
Okay, because
not.
I
They're good
could
for
use
anything.
them like during the day. I would really have some explaining to do if I was,
Turn it around so nobody sees the logo.
But so what's interesting though, so Cisco actually sponsors a major partner program within my organization. So I train and enable all of our partners here in NorCal about the Dell Technologies portfolio, and Cisco is one of the main global partners for that. And I get asked every single time I get up on stage or turn on the Zoom and say, "Yeah, Cisco is our global sponsor," and I get kind of looked at with a crazy eye, like, "Aren't you competitors?" Yeah, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. We
It's
work together. We're all part of the same.
what do they call
You're distant cousins, right?
what do they call Microsoft and Apple? What's the term? Frenemies? I think it's the
Something
same
like
thing.
that.
It's the same
Something like that,
you
right?
know,
We all get along.
the companies, from the fact that we both sell technology, yes, there's a level of competition in certain product lines,
Yeah.
but then there's other product lines that are not competitive, and there's other activities that companies do that are not competitive. So to say that two companies are competitors, like blanket statement, it's never that simple. It just isn't that simple.
Your networking technology is integrated deeply into some of our storage solutions as well. So look, I think it's better
Yeah.
as well for yeah, we're both the 800-pound gorilla out there, right? Cisco's huge in terms of everything that you do, especially from a networking
Mhm.
perspective. Dell's huge in terms of all the other pieces of the data center, but if
Yeah.
we don't work together, uh,
And you know what? At the end of
we're better for working together. I would just say
Yeah.
that.
And at the end of the day, when you speak about especially, and you know this as well as I do, when you talk to customers or partners or anyone about technology, nobody has any of just one thing.
Yeah.
That is not realistic. No
Hmm.
company has any. I am all Cisco or I am all Dell, because there's a lot of
Yeah,
stuff
that's not
that
going
we
to
don't
happen.
make or that you don't make or that this other company doesn't make. And there's other times where it just doesn't make sense to have all of one
Yeah.
for a variety of reasons. So it's never as simple as we're going to win all the bit as a sales organization. We're going to win all the business. Like, cool to say that, but that's not real. Like, that's not how life actually works.
Yeah,
So
it's not really going to happen. Folks
no.
who have been in the industry for a while know a little bit better than that. Yeah, you can give us the rah at the
And you know,
at the national kickoffs and
and
all
that's a
those
cool.
things, but it's not
It's
gonna
kind of an interesting segue a little bit into the new role that I have, because the teams, the folks that work for me now, and that I'm the organization that I get to be a part of now. A big part of that is enabling people to understand how to make what they own do more, not just by itself, but like using APIs and
happen.
automation as an
Okay.
example
Yeah.
to connect things more together to expand on that. So you can take your current technology investment and have it solve more problems than you originally could with those things by themselves. And that involves the word you use, integration. Each thing is working together in different ways to solve unique problems that they couldn't do by themselves. And that's exciting. That's the fun part about this, is getting them to do those things to solve a problem unique to that particular organization. And then another company can see that and learn from it and iterate on that and do something different. And that's a large part of what the people on my team do every single day, is try to find those places where those integrations can happen and then show those to people so they can see what's possible and then take the next step.
You know what? Let me put his website back up, ladies and gentlemen. This is Jeff Bull right here. Somebody need to go Google this guy, right? Because he's definitely
Well, I mean,
making good things
some of
happen.
those pictures, they're unintentional, and I'm kidding, totally kidding. I haven't actually Googled myself in years. I should look. Hopefully, there's no kilt pictures out there, because that'd be awkward.
Well, hold on. Let me take a look. No, we'll do that, and we'll do that maybe in an after show or something like that.
That's probably a good idea.
Hey, well, sir, I don't want you to get in trouble tonight. I want you to go and be responsive to the needs of the other individuals in the household. Maybe you've got some grass to cut. I don't know what's happening tonight in the Bull House, but and I obviously don't want you to trip over the steps heading out of your studio because you had that 8% drink right there. But I do want to know what's next for you.
Intermixing with a big tankard of water as well. I'm being a responsible live video guy.
I love it. But tell us what's next for you, right? I mean, it can either be your shows, it can be continued evolution of your learning your craft, whatever the case may be. But tell the folks what you got going on next.
Great question. I think for me, the big one right now, it's top of mind, is my Star Wars show. So I really want to. There's two things. They're a little superficial, but I'm really excited about them, which is I want to I'm continuing to build the rhythm for doing this live stream every week, making sure I do it, bringing value to the community and the audience that is there with me every week, and growing that audience so that I can continue to have an impact, which I'm excited about, and just have fun with it. Like, have a good time doing something that I just really, really am excited about. It doesn't have to be super meaningful or what have you. It can just be fun, and that's okay. And so I want to keep doing that. One of my real goals right now is I want to hit 100 subscribers on YouTube. That's my goal. I think it was at 68 as of this morning. So I'm getting little increments, and it's super awesome that people are supporting, but I really, really want to get to 100 subscribers. And I'm going to plug this real quick. I don't have it with me in here, but for anybody out there who loves Star Wars, I have a copy of the new Timothy Zahn book, Thrawn Ascendancy, sitting in the house. And as soon as I hit 100 subscribers, I'm going to be raffling that off. So if anyone's so inclined and would like to help me get to that 100 subscriber number, I am going to be raffling off a book for free that I will ship to anybody who wants.
What number did you think you were at?
I think I'm at 68 right now.
You got another one. You're 69 right now.
Woo!
So look at that.
Thank you, community. I appreciate you.
You know what?
We're not worried.
It may have been since I got the link up right here. There you go. Someone watching this show.
To you, because this is where I've been for the last half hour, 45 minutes. So thank you. You and your community got me there. I appreciate it.
Let me hold on. Let me refresh, because it's 69. Yes. Okay.
I will take it. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Awesome.
But yeah, other than the live stream, professionally, my big thing right now is to really keep growing in the role that I have now. I've been in the role for about 5.5 months, which is a lot of fun. And I want to keep trying to have a positive impact on the people that I work with every day and the parts of the organizations that I'm responsible to kind of grow and figure out what the next steps need to be. So it's a little ambiguous to say that, but in large part, my responsibility is around, helping out not just our technical sellers in all the Americas, and making sure that they understand the value of learning like programmability and automation and why that's important. Not just, we have a certification that's out. It's fantastic if somebody wants to go for that, but really the journey and going from, I don't understand these things, but I don't want to be a coder. That's totally fine. Learning how to write code isn't the requirement. It's the learning that and understanding that things like APIs open up a whole new world for you to solve problems in different ways than you could solve before, which I think really is kind of that roadmap to business architecture that we really need to go for in our technical sellers. Get people to a place of understanding the architecture of running a business and using technology to support that. Understanding what programmability or automation tools can do allows you to better solve those problems. So in large part, it's enabling the Americas part of our company and technical sellers to be better at that, and then doing a lot of outreach to our counterparts in APJC, because they just don't always get as many resources as we would like them to get. So in large part, I'm really working to help make sure that we can provide even more support to them, and they can advance their things in the ways that make sense for their countries in that segment. So it's really cool. There's a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of ambiguity, but that's the fun part. So
dude, that's why we get up and do it every single day, right? Because again, if we were bored, we'd stop and we go do something else, and we're not ready to retire. And if there's still value to provide, get out there and get to it.
Absolutely. Yep.
I love it. Jeff, I appreciate you, man. Thank you very much for taking some time. I believe this was very valuable. I'm gonna be selfish. I enjoyed it, and I'm sure the folks watching and listening to the podcast afterwards will enjoy it as well. But you're a good man. Keep doing the good work.
Absolutely.
Keep having those at-home segments. Well, the Star Wars show as well, but those at-home sessions are amazing, right? Again, just tapping into the mindsets of the folks in your circle, and just letting folks tell their story, man. I wish you nothing but the best, and keep striving forward, brother.
Absolutely, man. James, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it, dude. Cheers.
You got it, man. You too.